Can you take your phone and put it in your pocket? I think it might be a touching noise.
It's close. It's all better than I know.
Yeah, I know. Alrighty. Good evening. Welcome to our November school committee open meeting. It is Monday, January 6th, and it is approximately 6:34, and I am going to call us into session. We have our liaison to the Financial Planning Committee, Scott Strickland, and he is sitting at the table with us tonight. He's joining us. We appreciate him coming and reporting back. It's a great meeting. We have some budget things going on tonight, as usual. We also have two members of our committee that are remote participation, Joan and Bryce. So we will be doing roll call votes for anything that needs to be voted on. And did I miss anything else? I don't think I missed anything else, right? Okay. Alrighty. So on the agenda is our audience sharing. Any audience sharing? No? All right, moving right along then. We have new business principal reports from Principal Karen.
Thank you. I'm going to start with Milliken. The Milliken Music Department held 3 wonderful concerts before vacation. All were well attended and our musicians sounded wonderful. Our PTO generously sponsored the staff holiday luncheon before winter break. 8th graders are visiting Algonquin this week. We are thankful for that partnership as our students prepare to transition to the high school. Wachusett Ski Club begins tomorrow. Thank you to Christine Masseet for leading this school offering. On January 16th and 17th, our 6th and 7th graders will be treated to the annual favorite performance of the Chariot of the Sun. This interactive Greek mythology presentation is sponsored by our PTO. On January 24th, we have a grade 7 fun night scheduled, and on January 30th and 31st, representatives from the district attorney's office will present information to students about bullying and harassment. Our multilingual learners will be completing the state access assessments in January and early February. Thank you to Lonnie Soder and Catherine Arcona for working to plan and organize the assessments and for supporting our students. Now for all of the elementaries, each 5th grade chorus and band winter concert will be held this month. Students and music teachers have been working very hard to prepare for the wonderful event. A special thank you to our district music staff, Mrs. Whalen and Ms. Macara, for their exceptional work this year. Kindergarten registration for 2025 and 2026 school is now open. The phones have been ringing off the hook, by the way. Letters were mailed to families using the town census information, and registration information can be found on the school and district websites. The teachers in Northborough will be completing mid-year ELA and math testing over the next few weeks. We will then hold data meetings for each grade to plan intervention support for the second half of the school year. Our multilingual learners will be completing the state access assessments in January and early February. This test measures each EL student's proficiency in reading, writing, listening, and speaking in English. Students will take the test individually and in small groups. A huge thank you to our wonderful ELD teachers for organizing and administrating this test. The Say Something Anonymous reporting system will be rolled out to Northborough 5th graders during January. Information is being shared with staff and families this week, and then principals will be introducing it to the students later this month. This program teaches students, teachers, and administrators how to recognize warning signs and signals, especially within social media, of individuals who may be at a threat or to themselves or to others, and it encourages people to speak up to a trusted adult, and it is an anonymous reporting system. We are excited to bring this to the grade 5 elementary level. Now for Peasley. At Peasley School, 5th grade has a unique opportunity to enhance their leadership skills by applying their expertise in one of the following groups: cultural, welcoming, Patriot, or Food Pantry. This week, we are excited to welcome 5 new students across grade levels who will be greeted by the 5th graders in the Welcoming Leadership Group on their first day of classes or during a visit that occurs prior to their start date. During these visits, new students will tour the building, visit various classes, and meeting key personnel, including office staff, specialists, and our school nurse. This program not only helps 5th graders develop their communication and skills, but also provides the new students with a supportive connection beyond their classroom. We're excited to announce the launch of our first ST Math Camp facilitated by Mrs. Greenspan, our Peasley School ST Math champion. The camp pairs fifth grade students mentors with third and fourth graders who would benefit from extra practice. The mentorship program aims to provide encouragement, peer modeling, and strategy building time for students to work on ST Math. Both teachers and students are enthusiastic about the opportunity to engage in guided practice while also allowing older students to share their passion for math with the younger students. We are excited to announce our annual PTO-sponsored Winterfest taking place on Friday, January 31st. This fun winter-themed social event will feature a variety of games, activities, arts, and crafts for students and their families to enjoy. All proceeds from Winterfest will support enrichment programs both in and out of school, as well as provide essential classroom and recess supplies. We greatly appreciate the hard work and dedication that goes into planning such a large-scale event. A special thank you goes to the National Honor Society at Algonquin Regional for helping out and volunteering for this event. Proctor School, students in Mrs. Amara and Mrs. O'Neill's second grade classes engaged in robot races with Mrs. Perrin during their tech class. Students worked in teams to learn how to program and drive the robots, then competed by guiding their robots to score goals using yellow and green balls. The students had a blast engaging in this fun event. Our third graders took a field trip to New England Aquarium, which was a perfect complement to their recent Wit and Wisdom Module 1 with the essential question, why do people explore the sea? Thank you to Mrs. Fury and Mrs. O'Connor for organizing the trip and for the Proctor PTO for funding the buses and providing scholarships for students in need. In our second school site council meeting, we continue to work on fostering a sense of belonging with our school community and school culture. One of our key focuses this year will be to develop a parent-caregiver survey to gather insights about belonging and engagement. At the Z School, on December 17th, Z fourth graders went on a field trip to the Lowell Mills. They learned about the Industrial Revolution while gaining a perspective of the working conditions, life, and diversity of the mill workers. It was a great experience, and the students and the staff are very thankful for the PTO for funding this field trip. The staff at Z will meet this week for our final book club meeting to discuss The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. The book has sparked some real great conversations about how we educate our students and also how we parent our own children. Our biggest takeaways have been that we need to give children more autonomy to make choices and take risks in the physical world while providing more structure and support in the virtual world. Now at Lincoln School. At Lincoln Street, students and staff participated in a theme week right before break. Our SEL leaders created a Shine Your Light activity that was celebrated around the building. Teachers welcomed guest readers and speakers to share their experiences based on different holidays in December. We had another successful drive in December with the Bay State Textiles. On December 18th, our fifth graders walked to Whitney Place to spread holiday cheer. Students sang songs and dressed in their most festive attire. To wrap up the week on Friday, we had a sing-along and sliming assembly for the entire school to enjoy. As a reward for the fun run proceeds and the student participation, students slimed 3 staff, 2 students, and me. January brings an opportunity for a fresh start at Lincoln Street. The SEL theme for the month is Unique Like a Snowflake. Students will create snowflakes that express their individuality, and they will display them throughout the building. Our buddy classrooms continue to build relationships. Grade 2 and Grade 4 worked collaboratively on Friday to make their New Year's resolutions together. Our ST Math goal was achieved for December with a 46% completion rate. And we would like to welcome Mrs. Laura Branchard to the LSS staff this week. She is a long-term substitute in Grade 5. At the end of January, we will be partnering with ARHS Career Exploration and Innovation Program by welcoming 2 student interns into our building. We welcome enrichment programs from Discovery Museum this month, and lastly, on January 16th, we will host the PTO Cookies and Cocoa event, which provides an opportunity for community members and staff to lead story time. That was a lot.
But you read it so efficient.
I do
appreciate enthusiasm. We appreciate
Thank
you. It sounds like great things happening at all of our schools, as usual. Excitement always makes me happy to hear the good things. Does anybody have any questions about anything?
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There's just one thing that I meant to start the meeting off with, and I forgot, but I do want to just share my condolences with Mrs. Ellen Windus's family. She passed away. She was a Melican math teacher and passed away on New Year's Day. She was my daughter's teacher too, so I did know her, but she wasn't at Melican long. This is her first year teaching at Melican, but I saw her at the chorus concert. She came to the 6th grade fun night dance to chaperone. So she really did engage herself and immerse herself in the school. And so she will be missed, I'm sure, by many. So I do just wanted to express that to her family. And I did see online that I think services are going to be on Saturday. So just so people know. All right, thank you. Unless there's anything else for Principal Callahan, I don't think there's anything else. You're welcome to dismiss yourself.
Thank you. Take the dismissal.
But thank you so much for coming.
No problem.
Is it?
I think the TV shut itself off.
Oh, is it timed out? Is it on a sleep timer?
It's the Vizio, right?
Yeah. There's a remote there. I don't know if you want to grab the remote and maybe give the remote to. Yeah, maybe keep the remote maybe, in case it times out again, just in case. Okay, MCAS presentation.
Thank you. It says I'm connected, but what's going on? Okay. All right. The Apple TV is on. There we go. There we go. Okay. Thank you. Sorry about that. So thank you for the opportunity to present and share our MCAS results from the spring of 2024. Some of these things we kind of go over every year, but just to really frame the presentation, we, as part of the MCAS assessment, is part of the accountability system, and the purpose is to really provide clear data to families, to community, to educators, and the public to inform the district about district and school performance, and for DESE to think about resource allocation and assistance and support. We always, and I'll probably say it many times, see MCAS as one of many sources of data. It is, a single assessment on a point in time. So it is helpful, it is important, and we look at it closely, but it is not the only assessment that informs our work. So it is also, I think, in that vein, helpful to kind of remind ourselves of how we are guided by our vision and our strategic plan and our strategic objectives. And we do believe that there is alignment between these and between the state accountability system, in the sense that if we are doing a good job of creating students who are critical and creative thinkers, who are communicators and collaborators and all of those things, they will find success also in a standardized assessment such as MCAS. A couple of updates about the assessment itself. Most of this was what we might call a pretty normal year with MCAS, in the sense that we were really using the assessments in the way that they have been done in the past. One change was that in 8th grade, students took the MCAS civics assessment, which was in field test. So the previous year it was a pilot, which we were not part of. In the spring of '24, it was a field test, which means that it was given throughout the state, but did not count towards accountability, and we get no results really, like you wouldn't see it on a student's assessment results. And then next year, or this school year, it will be part of the assessment process.
That's gotta be frustrating for kids, though, to have taken something and not know how they did.
Well,
Why didn't they put
they
it
get
on the-
results on there's,
Because you know you get the
Civics.
paper, I meant to
Right.
bring mine too, for those who, I don't know if you've seen the result that the parents get, but like, you know, it says their math, their
Right.
English, and then the historical data
Yeah.
too.
I think for teachers, it's hard too. They get very little
Yeah.
information back about the field test.
Mm.
So,
That's frustrating.
but I think for the state, then it can serve its purpose, which is to truly be a field test, and for them to learn from it and not, not try to draw any other kinds of conclusions from it, because it really is still in development mode. In 2024, our participation rates remained high at 99% for ELA, math, science, ELA, math, and science. So again, sort of, information you've seen before, but to remind ourselves of who are our students. Our overall enrollment is relatively steady over time, but as you can see, and as we have talked about before, we celebrate increasing diversity, in our students in multiple dimensions, both in terms of race and ethnicity, but also in terms of what DESE refers to as special populations, in terms of students who are high-needs students, which includes students with disabilities, low-income students, and English language learners. When we talk about MCAS, we're going to talk about two different aspects of MCAS. One is achievement, which is the performance level. And there are every student has a scaled score, which you could think of as like the number of how they did. And then those scaled scores are divided into 4 ranges: not meeting expectations, partially meeting expectations, and exceeding expectations. And what we'll look at is we often look at meeting and exceeding, because when students are in the meeting expectations or the exceeding expectations, then we know they're at grade level or above. And so that's how we'll sort of categorize some of the data. So first, I'm going to take us through English language arts. I'll sort of reveal this slide step by step so that we can just make sure we all are looking at the same thing. Basically, what we have here is achievement levels. So the blue at the top is exceeding, green is meeting expectations, orange is partially meeting, and red is not meeting. That's grade 3 that we're looking at, and it's in 2022, 2023, and 2024. So you're seeing 3 years worth of data for grade 3. And then we have grade 4, same thing, 22, 23, 24, grade 5, and kind of continue on up. So overall, we have, a lot of stability in our scores if you look at this, but if you look in a more fine-grained way, often what people like to look at is how did we do in 24 compared to 23? And so at a state level, in general, scores were lower in English language arts across the state. I will say kind of to the point where as scores were coming out, I had other assistant superintendents who were emailing and checking in. Did your ELA scores go down? Did it, there was a little bit of kind of a murmur. Why I keep disconnecting? So we mirrored the state in that respect, that our scores were a little bit lower. I'll try to reconnect here. And we saw that in comparable districts as well. Not sure why.
And then the other thing to note too by it, so it's like if you want it to look at a class specifically.
That's what,
Grade 3 would be 20,
yeah, that's what the
22,
next visual.
and then, right,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I don't know why.
That's like while you're, do you ever look like, you have grade 3, and are there any programs, or is there anyone do statistics on like, okay, does this number to that number actually significant an actual change, or it's still within variation of the last 5 years? Obviously with COVID, looking back too far is gonna be tough anyway, but, like, in
You're
other
talking about
words-
when you look at a single cohort, or when you look from 22 to 23 of a grade level?
I was
Or
thinking
either
of a
one.
grade level, but you could do both, right? Yeah, so if you're looking at a grade level, how do you know that lower scores is actually impactful, and this is something we really need to pay attention to versus it's kind of the normal deviation of what
Yeah.
we see?
So we don't typically do really sophisticated statistical analysis, partly that the sort of depth of the data and the size of our sample sizes, it's not necessarily going to be worth the energy for that. But I will say that across the state, hopefully reconnecting soon, they generally say, like, if you're looking, for example, if you're looking, let's say, at a grade level, now the Apple TV. They generally say not to, like the state considers if it's plus or minus 1, for meeting or exceeding, plus or minus 1 or 2%, they consider that staying stable. When you get to plus or minus 3, they think of that as a change. That's how the state tends to talk about it for achievement levels. Growth we'll talk about when we get to growth. It's actually different with growth.
Okay.
I think everyone has the presentation in their packet, so if you can follow along, that'd be great.
Okay,
So
that
I would
sounds
just
great.
continue.
Okay, so what, in your packet, what Kelly was referring to was those orange circles going from like, the ones that I circled as an example were grade 6 in 2022, grade 7 in 2023, grade 8 in 2024. Those would be the same cohort of students. So it's also important to remember that if you're looking, you are not comparing the same students when you look at just a single grade level. The next slide is just an aggregate score for grade 3 through 8, which is just another measure. And what we did do with this data was compare to comparable districts, which the Department of Education identifies districts that have comparable demographics, comparable size, various different statistics. And we had very similar results in the sense that in our comparable districts, they either showed slight decreases or were staying level, which was similar to what we saw, and it's what we saw sort of grade level by grade level as well. So in terms of student growth percentile, this is the other measure that we are provided from the Department of Education and that we use to look at our growth. And while achievement is telling us about performance at a moment in time, growth is a measure to help us think about the rate of change for a student or for a group of students. The way growth percentile is calculated is that students are compared to students who had a similar test history, and they try to use 2 years worth of testing results. In some cases, if they only have 1 year, like 4th graders, they only have 3rd grade. So they will use just 3rd grade. But if they're 5th graders, they use 4th grade and 3rd grade. And what they will do is say, these are students who had a similar testing history, and then they compare their relative growth. So did they grow average amount compared to students who had a similar testing history? Would be right around the 50th percentile, which means they grew more than 49% of the kids. If they had a lower rate of growth, their growth percentile might be 20th percentile, which would say that they only grew faster than 19% of the kids, but the other 80% or whatever grew faster than them, and vice versa. So if they have a high growth percentile, it means they grew faster than a larger percentage of the kids. Does that make sense? So when we look at growth percentile, we often talk about the average growth percentile of a group of kids. In this graph, what you're looking at is both growth and achievement together. So on the x-axis, you have our average growth percentile. So that is literally averaging the growth percentile of every child in ELA, grades 3 through 8. And on the y-axis, you have the percent of students who are meeting or exceeding, which is what we just looked at previously. And the star represents the state. So our bubble, right in the middle, basically says that we were kind of right in the middle in terms of having average growth and having about 51% of our, or no, the opposite, 49% of our students meeting or exceeding expectations. The different quadrants, I think, are a helpful way to think about it. What we'd really like to see is high growth, high achievement, which is that upper right quadrant. So that's where we're sort of trying to push the bubble. What I think is also a really important aspect of the way we use the MCAS data is looking at our as Desi refers to, our subgroups or our special populations. There's a lot of information on this page, but this is really the level of detail that we have. This is looking at grades 3 through 8, but we also have this information grade by grade, so that we can really get very detailed about looking at how different groups of students are doing. The column that I just circled is the average scaled score, so that's what I had talked about that puts you in one of those different categories. And to the left of that, you can see the categories of exceeding, meeting, partially meeting, not meeting. And then the next column is the growth percentile for that subgroup, depending on which row it is. What we have noticed is the pattern when we look at our subgroups in ELA is that the gap, there is an existing gap in achievement from many of our subpopulations to the majority. So for example, if we look at our low-income students, 25% of our low-income students are meeting or exceeding expectations in ELA, grade 3 through 8 in the aggregate, whereas 58% of non-low-income students are meeting or exceeding. But when we look at our growth percentile, the gap is not as stark. We have an average growth percentile of 45 for our low-income students and an average growth percentile of 50 for our non-low-income students. So they're both in a similar sort of area for growth. The challenge is, and that is true for other subgroups for us as well, students with disabilities is a very similar. The challenge for us is that to close the gap, we need our students who are low-income students or our students with disabilities, our high-need students, to grow faster than their peers if we're going to close the gap. So that's the piece that we're looking at here, is how do we accelerate learning for those students beyond their peers. So I'm going to take us through the same information for math and a little bit faster since you know what you're looking at. But these are our achievement levels in math. In the statewide, the math results this year were mostly stable, except for third grade. The state saw an increase in achievement. We were similar in the sense that we were mostly stable, but our grade level increases were at different grade levels than the state. We increased more at fourth grade than than they did. But overall, it was sort of, we had a little bit up, a little bit down, mostly stable in math. In terms, again, it's the same thing of if you look at a cohort of students, you just have to remember to look, you know, from one year to the next as you go across the grades. And when we compared ourselves to comparable districts, again, we saw the districts around us also being fairly stable with slight increases, slight decreases, but there weren't kind of dramatic changes in math. And it's a fairly similar graph in terms of the aggregate growth for our 3 through 8 math as well. We're a little bit up into that right-hand quadrant, right? So a little bit higher growth and a little bit higher achievement. And then when we look at our subpopulations, it's again sort of a similar scenario. And so I'll use the same example of low-income students. You know, while we have 28% of low-income students meeting or exceeding expectation, 64% of our non-low-income students are meeting or exceeding expectations. The growth percentile is 46 compared to 53 for non-low-income. So maybe a little bit larger of a gap in math than ELA, but pretty similar profile. So that's, again, a big part of our conversation. And then in science, technology, and engineering, this is our 5th grade from 22, 23, and 24, and this is achievement. So it's our students meeting, exceeding, not meeting, or partially meeting. I said that out of order, not sure why. And pretty stable. We don't have growth scores in science because they only take it in 5th grade and 8th grade. And then these are our 8th grade results, which also are fairly stable. In both cases, we are exceeding the state in 5th grade, where our results are, you know, in the, like, this year it was 61% meeting or exceeding. The state was at 45% meeting or exceeding. And in 8th grade, where we were at 58% meeting or exceeding, the state was at 39%. So as a benchmark there. Yeah, so that's what I just talked about. And again, we don't have growth scores, but we still are paying attention to those gaps that we're trying to close for some of our subgroups.
Why don't they do it, the science, and why only in 5th and 8th?
I mean, I think some of it is an acknowledgement of just it's a lot of testing already and trying to make choices. I think also that in terms of time on learning, you know, people really are sort of trying to keep everything and do everything, but if we add more tests, it's more time not learning, it's more time testing. So I can't say exactly why those grades, but the 5th grade assessment and the 8th grade assessment are both cumulative. So the 5th grade assessment is of standards all the way that lead up to 5th grade, and then the 8th grade assessment is 6th, 7th, and 8th grade standards. But I don't know,
also,
Lauren, you might have insights about this.
So the framework recommends certain years for teachers to teach certain standards, but it's just recommended. So for example, you know, I'm a 7th grade science teacher, I may say, hey, 8th grade science, I think this actually is better fit for your curriculum. Can we swap a couple standards? So I think a lot of schools who either do that or who still teach subject by subject each year instead of doing the spiralized curriculum, it wouldn't really make sense to test every year because every school is doing something a little bit different. But the goal is, say, in middle school, by the end of 8th grade, you've covered everything. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Just as a, in conclusion, to think about just how we use the MCAS results, this is really a high-level look at mostly aggregate results. Even when we look at the subgroups, we're still looking at, you know, large groups of students. But when we're looking at this at a school level or at a grade level or at a classroom level, we're not only disaggregating by subgroups, but actually looking at the level of individual students, thinking about who needs academic acceleration, where sometimes kids exceed our expectations, sometimes they're underperforming compared to what we would expect, identifying where there's needs for intervention, triangulating the results and saying how do they fit or not fit with other data that we use, thinking about social emotional learning and potentially non-academic barriers to learning. And particularly at different grade levels, teachers really dig in at the level of item analysis. And so they will look at, this is a graph of, this particular one is ELA 8th grade as an example. And this is item by item, with the top line being Melican, 8th grade, and the bottom line being the state, where they can look item by item, and then they might look at certain items and say, wow, look at item number 28. We really dropped below the state. And we can look at the actual item, if it's a released item, and say, what do we think is going on here? Or, look at item number 11 and item number 12, where the gap between us and the state was smaller. But the teachers really do dig in item by item and think about the standards that are being taught. And that's just another way that we look at the MCAS results. Happy to answer questions or go back to any of the slides.
I will turn it over to our virtual people first. I don't know. Is it Joan?
So Joan has a question.
Okay.
Of course, I'm going to have questions on this. Stephanie, thank you very much for your presentation. I know I brought this up to Greg before, and this would be the second year of this request. If you go to slide 10 for ELA and slide 16 for math, a column that I would like to see to be added would be, what were the MCAS scores before COVID? Because I think that is something that's very telling. I think people, even in the business world, are still talking about post-COVID, and we're past the medical, people are still getting COVID, but even businesses are coming back and saying, we want to have less remote workers. We want to have people coming in 3 days a week. I would like to see, so I can compare,
So
what was
2018?
the ELA and the math before we had COVID, because I think we still have some of the effects of the COVID, and I think that would be very telling.
So
My
that would,
second-
like 2018, is that what you're thinking? Because I think that's probably, right? Because
The
2018,
18 and 19 would be
19,
Okay.
right? Because
One of the
19,
we definitely can do that, Joan. One of the challenges in some of the areas is that the rating system changed. Was that or was that just the high school? I can't remember, but we could definitely do that. We don't include 21 on purpose because it was a different testing format, and 20 obviously we didn't have the test, but we could put previous years.
And even if it is higher, even if it's lower, that is only because it's post-COVID, okay? And there, I just would like to see what it was before all the upheaval in the country, so, and in the educational system. So if it would be 2018, I don't have the direct year on that, that would be great, okay?
Sure. Yep.
The second thing that I would like would be on slides 11 and 17. You compare our district to the state. What I'd like to see, because it has been in the Northborough patch, is comparing our district to comparable neighboring districts that we have. As long as I've been in education, my school district of Hopkinton, Northborough, as long as I've been on school committee since, 1993, we've always done better than this state. But I would like to know, how are we doing compared to Westboro, Hudson, Hopkinton? How are we doing in communities that are similar to ours?
Yes.
if that can be arranged. And the only other question, a response that I have to Kelly's question, Kelly, in the beginning you asked about why you didn't get the results from the civics field test.
Yes.
My background is that I served at least for 5 years on the state ELA assessment for grades 4 and 5. And in that position, we would look at, even in the ELA test, sometimes there are passages that they are testing. And if you look at your child's score, there may be maybe like questions 30 through 35 that might be blank, and it's not counted against the students, but they are testing passages and questions. I know that through that position that I had with the state, we would look at some of the questions and we would look to see, as if Stephanie would go to slide 14, which was the different groups. When they field test these, they look for bias on questions. What is the percentage of students in ELL? If they find that there is a high percentage of students that are not understanding a passage and have a lot of low achievement, then we would look at that question and see why are the ELL students or the students with disabilities having difficulty answering that question. And many times in that session, which for grade 4 and grade 5, there are about 20 teachers all the way from Boston to Springfield. We sometimes would throw out questions, but the students were not graded against them. It's just a blank on your parent's score. You may see there's no, it says the student answered 30 through 35, but there's no answers. It's not counted against them. So that's why they do the field testing before that civics test will come and be in for the grades to do it. They got to check to see, because these questions are written by a company, but we got to see how they relate to our students in Massachusetts, and are they free of bias? And sometimes there's some questions that really aren't. So that's why you go through a test that is just a field test. Any questions, Kelly?
No, thank you. That makes sense.
Okay. And we have thrown out questions. Many times I didn't agree, but the majority would say, yes, this is a biased question, and we'd throw it out. Or even sometimes we did a whole passage and just said it was not appropriate for 4th grade or 5th grade. Okay? Thank you.
Thanks, Jolene.
I know that you said, in order for our some of our learners to close the gaps, we need to accelerate their learning even faster than other students. So I'm curious what kinds of opportunities there may be. I know our special education students have an opportunity to attend extended school year. And I think it was the ESSER grant that funded some summer tutoring a couple summers ago. So I didn't know what kinds of opportunities we may have, whether it's grant funded or otherwise, to try to accelerate that learning.
Well, one of the things that we have done recently is we have used our Title I funds historically for tutoring to provide extra academic support to some students. And we used to, a number of years ago, that was often before school and after school. And then in recent years, we moved it into the school day. And then this year was the first year that we actually have some of the funding for that coming out of our operational budget and some funding coming from Title I, so that we increased the amount of support so that we have a math interventionist split between each elementary school. And then we still also have math intervention at Melican as well, which with Title I alone we could not have. So we now have 2.5 days of math intervention at each elementary school and 2.5 days at Melican. So we've increased the amount of math intervention that we are focusing our attention at the elementary level with the youngest kids who are not actually taking MCAS, with the theory being much like we do with our reading support, that early intervention will pay off. So that's one thing we've been doing. We have not been looking really at extending the time. In part, we've really been focused on how can we best use the time when kids are in school. And we're also really looking at sort of our practices of when we pull kids out of class, because some of our kids who are in some of those groups are pulled, whether it's for ELD supports or for IEP services, but then they are sometimes missing grade level instruction. And so we're really carefully analyzing and looking at our scheduling of when are we pulling kids. And this year, well, it started last year with Wit and Wisdom, but we created some times where we said no students will be pulled, so that they are all getting grade level ELA core curriculum. So that was another sort of shift that we're working on. But yeah, it's a continuing problem that we, continue to grapple with. Those are a couple examples. I don't know, Greg, if there's any others that you...
No, I think that our, reading specialists in each of our schools really focus on Tier 2 instruction. So in addition to our core instructional program, also provides students with additional support in literacy, for example. But I think that, just echo, we're not trying to lengthen a student's day. There is a pace to learning, but making sure that the time that we have with our students, we're making sure that we're implementing instructional practices that are evidence-based, that really help students make up the gains that they need.
I guess the only other thing I would add is that I think, to the sort of sidebar conversation we had prior to the meeting, I think Meg and Kelty, together with the reading specialists, have just been doing a tremendous job of increasing our knowledge and skills around targeted interventions, so that whether it's a reading specialist or a classroom teacher, how are we using the screeners and the assessments, which are far more detailed than MCAS, and then saying, given this data, what is the targeted intervention that this student needs, and how do we measure progress? And in our district professional development day this year, a group of reading specialists offered 2 different workshops that were really about classroom teachers providing Tier 2 interventions in the classroom. And I kept having to find bigger rooms because more and more people were signing up for it. And we ended up with like 60-something elementary educators, at this, that's across Northborough and Southborough, at each of these workshops. I think there's a real appetite for that, very specific targeted support and knowledge around that. So that's also exciting. Great.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Appreciate it as always.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is talking about office hours.
So just an informational update. The next superintendent's office hour is scheduled for Monday, January 27th at 6:30 p.m. and it will be held at Algonquin Regional High School in the Career Resource Center. So we invite any parents or community members who would like to attend. And Joan has a question. Joan.
Thank you, Greg and Kelly. Greg, this is not your first one, so you have held 1 or 2 before this, but can you tell me how many you have held and what you have obtained from the ones that have already been commenced?
I've held 1 office hour thus far, and that was held in Southborough, and we had 4 parents attend. A couple from...
Yeah, I think more than that.
4 or 5 attend, and really from Northborough and the Southborough communities. I think it was nice to actually meet families that we otherwise would not have had an opportunity to meet. The concerns that were brought up range from transportation to IEP delivery. And overall, it was just a nice conversation to engage with a few parents that otherwise we would not. So I think it's just creating that space for smaller conversations and learning from families.
So,
I would
go ahead, John.
I would say, Greg, even though it's a small number, it's only 4, I think it's even worthwhile, even if it is 1. Someone who maybe cannot make a contact through the office, or someone who is new to the community. I think it's a great outreach to the community, and I hope that even though it's a small number, that this still continues, because 4 is important. So I thank you for giving up your extra time into this, and because we always say how busy, as we do your superintendent's evaluation, how busy you are and the support that we have to give to you. So thank you for extending and taking out more time out of your daily schedule, even family hours. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
And I'll just make a note, when you do post, because I know you'll probably have it in your memo, another Tuesday memo, is just because if you don't have a high schooler, you might not know where or what the career resource center is. So just maybe note, like, go through front door, whatever. Little map or something, because.
Algonquin's a large
Still gonna get
school.
lost.
Well, it's not that, but it's like, there's different entrances and different, I know we had somebody come for the library, the school committee last month, and they went through the front door, and I think then they somehow, I don't know how, I wouldn't have been able to go through the front door to find the library. I mean, I probably could now at this point.
I will add that to the next communication.
But that just might be a note for that. The other thing about office hours is, I know we talked about the school committee office hours. I didn't know if anybody would be willing to do maybe a Saturday morning. I don't know. There's 2 Saturdays that I have out there, or I could look into February. Maybe we should, if yours is January, maybe we'll look into a February weekend, maybe the first, second week of February. And then my other thought is, because I've talked to the Southborough people who have done the office hours, and perhaps we do like a registration type thing. So if nobody signs up, then basically we cancel it and don't show up. I know Chelsea has gone and sat for an hour and nobody has come. And I mean, we're all busy people. We are volunteers. And I could see that being a little frustrating. So if you guys are good with that, then maybe we can, the first or second one of us, obviously we can't do more than 3. We can't do 3. We have to do 2. So we can look at.
We can rotate too, like we want
Yeah.
to do more than one session, have 2 people at once.
Yeah, or maybe do I was thinking like a Saturday, maybe morning, and then maybe an evening during the week or something, or Saturday
Later or
evening, but
something. Like
yeah.
February and April or something like that.
Mhm.
Yeah, and with the office, I mean, if the registration works out, that's fine too. I'm very used to sitting in office hours
Yeah.
with nobody showing up.
And nobody shows up, yeah. Okay.
So you mean we would just have a cup of coffee in peace and quiet?
Right away from my kids.
Without your children?
Sounds appetizing.
Now don't,
I don't need a registration form.
now don't all rush to sign up for this.
Bring a book.
All right, so it sounds like Kristen and Bryce volunteer for the first one with no registration. Legislative update.
So just a few updates. The first is a statement from MASC regarding Bill H. 5098, which is the Lawrence School District. And the bill really removes the democratically elected seats and shifts it to a mix of appointed and at-large seats. So I think that's something to watch, although it's specific to Lawrence. I think people are watching across the Commonwealth what will happen with this specific bill. So it's just more informational for the committee.
Which is confusing to me, because I feel like they're leaving the receivership anyway, so the idea that they want to now take that away, it's interesting.
The second informational update in terms of legislation is just the Healy-Driscoll administration put out a request for vendors to develop mental health framework for students from early education through higher education. So we'll be watching that closely as it moves forward. And then lastly, I shared with you the commissioner's December update. So just giving you a lens into what the commissioner communicates on a monthly basis. Typically, we find out information around professional development opportunities, grants. There's a whole host of information that is shared with us, so I thought I'd share that with the committee this month. And
Great.
those are the updates from the legislative front.
Great, thank you. Next on the agenda is approval of grants and donations. We will have to do a roll call vote on them, and we can read them together. For the motion, we can read them together and then vote on them together. The first one I'm very excited about. The Melican PTO has purchased a color poster printer for the Melican School, and it's something that they could print posters on. A lot of their stuff in their classrooms now is poster work and everything like that, so this is something that they're excited about. And they can also make vinyl banners and things like that, so.
I thought you were in the school committee meeting. Yeah.
So Kristen and I found this printer a few years ago at the MASC conference, and we tried to get one for the district, but it didn't work out for the budget. And I was like, I gotta get this in Northborough somehow. So the PTO has graciously gifted this to the school. So that's one of the things to vote on.
Joan does have a question.
Joan?
Yeah, I put my hand up just before you got, both you and Kristen were talking about it, because I was going to say, is this, I remember after the November meeting last year, you brought a lot of those posters back, and you were really excited about it. So I was wondering if this is the same type of thing that will be available for the students.
Yes, this is the poster. How they will end up doing it will be up to them on how they want to, whether it maybe be something, an art project or something, and they put it into it, or if there's a graphic class, I don't know. That will be to, later on for them to figure out. But they have basically printer and ink, paper and ink to last this year and probably most of next year. So there was email communication on setting up training and delivery. So that'll probably come this month, and they'll probably use this year to figure out how they want it.
The question is, will there be poster paper for the Apple Fest parade so we can print a new one?
That's great.
Hey, that's good. And Kelly, that was my other follow-up question, was going to be if that was just the printer, or we're going to have to put it into the operational budget.
So, yes.
The supplies, but it looks like you did a great job in getting enough supplies
Yeah.
going for the rest of this year and next year.
Yeah, exactly. So that was the thing, is how much is this going to cost to run going forward? And so by purchasing it before the end of December, there was an extra bonus package that had extra paper and ink, so we'll get them beyond the starter one, so that'll get them probably. And again, it depends on how many. I think the ink package and the papers that they got would make, depending on how long the posters are, or wide, depending on which way you look at it. It's like 200. The ink is enough for 200, posters, so.
That's good. And where's it going to be housed in the school? Who's going to be the lucky floor to get it?
They just sent the specs to them. I think initially they were thinking they were going to put it somewhere in the main office, the conference room, I think. And Nicole was going to be the gatekeeper of it.
Yeah.
But I don't know if they're going to, once they got the specs on how big it is, I don't know if they're going to change that or not. But that was the initial talk. So.
Okay, thanks for answering my questions. Thanks, Kelly.
Yeah, no problem.
And congratulations.
And the next one is the multilingual newcomers and homeless support grant. The amount of $7,820. Is this,
So this is in response to the students who have enrolled as a result of a homeless shelter in our community. So that's some funding to offset the costs to the district.
and is the Econolog, is it back up? Are there people still there? or
Yes,
there-
so we do
there
have,
are-
I think they have a number of rooms occupied.
Okay.
And as a result, we do have students attending our schools. And again, this money is to support our newcomers and some of our homeless families.
Great. Does anyone want to make a motion?
I don't mind making a motion.
Lauren?
I move to approve the donation of an eColor Plus S2 24-inch full-color poster printer to Melican Middle School from the Melican Middle School PTO, valued at $4,040, as well as to approve the multilingual newcomer and homeless support grant in the amount of $7,820.
Second.
Moved by Lauren, seconded by Kristen. Any discussion? Bryce?
Yes.
Joan?
Yes,
Kristen?
Yes.
Lauren?
Yes.
And myself is a yes. It passes unanimously. Thank you so much for these generous donations and grants, and for the people who applied to the grant. Transportation contract award discussion.
As the committee is aware, we did go out for transportation. So we are in the process of procuring transportation. We received the bids on December 16th. And we have 30 days until the bid opening to make a decision. We have had some preliminary meetings with the chair of Southborough, the chair of the region, and also the chair of Northborough to discuss a direction. It will take a combined or a joint meeting to award the contract, or award the bid, or to make a decision on what the next steps are. So this evening, Becca will provide some baseline data of what the bids look like, and then engage in a conversation around a direction that the Northborough School Committee is interested in pursuing.
And I do, just for the record, it's not the chair of the region, it's not Chris Cavini. He has stepped back from the discussion because of his side job with transportation. So he has removed himself from the discussion, so there's no conflict of interest.
So it is Sean O'Shea.
So Sean O'Shea is representing the region, just so it goes on record for that.
Yes, so we did receive 2 bids on December 16th. The first from NRT, our current provider of transportation services, and the second was from First Student. In analyzing those bids, we've been really looking through what was submitted to make sure that they did comply with the requirements that were outlined in the bid document. It does appear that at this point, the Northborough increase is a 51.95% increase over fiscal year '25, and that's for NRT. The First Student bid came in at a 89.25% increase over fiscal year '25. So these were some numbers that were a little bit higher than what we had projected. We are planning to meet with NRT to get some more backup as to what caused these larger numbers, because we are hearing some different numbers throughout the state. And we are also planning to put together a packet just to make sure that we have received everything that was requested in the bid documents from them. So at this point in time, there's a lot of analysis going on, and then we hope to present the 3 school committees with a plan for this contract within the next week or so.
I think it's important to note that it's a bit of a market correction, that for the past 5 years, we've had a favorable transportation contract that I think at this point now the 51% or the 89% increase really is a market correction to a really favorable contract that we've experienced over a 5-year period. The budget that we'll review this evening has the lowest bid, the 51% increase embedded in the budget at this point in time. So we have Joan and then.
And just one point of, just to mention, it's a 51% increase for the first year, and then after that, it is a 3% increase. So it is that initial hump that we need to get over, and then after that, it will level out just as our last contract did.
But the thing to keep in mind about that is when you do have contracts like that, and if you do the extension 351 to 3, in 3 to 5 years, we might face the same issue again.
Yeah, I think it's being cognizant that that may happen. Our job, though, is to procure, the most cost-effective bid as possible. And I think, looking forward, having a better forecasting system to really project what it might cost. So I think we are a victim of our own success of contractual negotiation from the last contract. And we're seeing transportation companies increasing their rates at a significant amount due to, I think, COVID and the pandemic and what they're experiencing and what they're having to pay their drivers.
Joan?
Thanks, Kelly. Becky or Greg, is this for both NRT and First Student? Were they both 3-year contracts or 5-year contracts?
We did go out for a 3-year contract with 2 1-year option years after that. So it could be a 5-year contract if the district chose to extend it.
Okay, so my second question is, on NRT, if the first year increase was 51.95%, the second year was 3%, what would be the following third year?
3%.
Okay. All right, thank you. And what about First Student? Did they give you anything, or you stopped for the second year and third year increases?
They would actually be 5% in both of those years.
Wow, okay. And Becky or Greg, I know that there was a doodle poll that was sent out by Cheryl and Cheryl Lepre about asking about when members could meet. I think it's like in 2 weeks, like January 16th or something, that Monday and Tuesday. Has there been a set date for that meeting?
No, we're working on making sure that the Southborough School Committee has a quorum on the 13th.
Okay.
So that is the date we're aiming for. Most likely, we'll be asking for an extension to a decision for the bid from First Student and NRT, which would give us a few more weeks to be able to coordinate meetings and have discussions. So
Okay.
January 13th is the tentative date,
Okay.
but we might have more time if that date does not work.
And then another question just came up. So what was the date that we'd have to decide
The
when you were going to
16th.
be asking NRT for an extension? What was the original date?
January 16th.
Okay. And I think that was an email. I just couldn't recall it real quickly. Okay, thank you very much.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So during COVID, with 2020, did it also bleed into 2021?
Yes, so 1920, we went out for a contract 2021.
Correct. I think we opened the bid 2 weeks before the shutdown.
Yeah.
So during that period of time when there was either very little or no students being transported to the schools, were we still paying the contract?
We were.
Okay.
And they were delivering food. They were using the buses for other reasons at the time.
Yeah, okay. I am just wondering when they're saying that part of the reason for the increase is what they experience during COVID, initially you would think that, well, they weren't
didn't say
earning a lot of
that.
money.
I'm saying that. Fuel
Oh, okay.
escalation costs, you know, driver shortages.
Got it.
Kind of that after impact of COVID
Okay.
is where we see the impact.
Got it, okay, all right.
Kristen, did you?
Yeah, my first question was, did you expect just 2 bids to come in? Is that low? Is that what you expected? Or, like, I don't know how many providers
It's
there
actually
are.
what we received 5 years ago from the same 2 vendors. I know Westboro went out and they only received 1 bid. We did send bids out to 4 transportation companies, so we were hoping to receive more, but it's in line with what we would expect.
Okay. Well, I wrote questions that maybe add to the legislative things to ask our legislators to fund that regional transportation
Yeah.
reimbursement
I
law.
think the question that we need to answer, or have NRT or First Student answer, is what is the improved quality of service to our community?
Mhm.
The quality of service by NRT has fallen short of our expectations, and to receive a 50% increase on the quality of service that we're getting is hard to really justify that level of increase.
Yeah, for the same level
So
of
we
services.
need to, it's a 51% increase over FY25. We need to make sure that there's value in that increase, and that it's going to impact what our families experience and what our students experience in transportation, and what we experience at central office in terms of managing transportation services for our community. So that's something we're looking closely at. We will be meeting with NRT to negotiate. There's no harm in negotiating and asking questions about, what is the increased quality of service and what's the guarantee? Because we can't continue to do what we've been doing. It's not working.
And is that happening before the school committee meeting? Is the hope?
We're meeting this week, I believe,
Wednesday.
with NRT.
I assume many, like, the newer contracts when you're negotiating probably would include the clauses that the current one has for if you're not meeting expectations, this is what's gonna happen, we're not,
Correct,
Yeah.
having sub-drivers, the age of bus, the conditions of bus, the technology on buses. There are some bid specifications that were developed that hopefully, if met, will improve the experience for students and families.
In addition to that, is there anything the district can look at as far as the people who opt out of transportation? Can things be modified based on, okay, all of these families don't need transportation, so we can change what we're doing to save money in that way? Or is it just too wishy-washy?
No, I think that we route all students at the start, and then we do that process of removing students or families who are not going to use transportation services so we make our routes efficient as possible. So I think it's something that we'll continue to look at with Sheila at the central office and Keith. One of the challenges we face is with our neighborhood schools and redistricting. We do have a cohort of students who are not attending their neighborhood schools, and we're still required to transport students to school, which makes some of our routes really inefficient. So we're also looking at trying to make sure that students can attend their neighborhood school, because it makes transportation much simpler for routing purposes.
Yeah, that makes sense. What I was thinking, I was wondering if that opting out, or if that happens in the first few weeks that you were describing, if that can happen even earlier, and would maybe best case scenario, wouldn't need a bus or something, or would cut down on efficiency. I know I usually get that question the first couple of weeks of school. When I registered my kindergartner, it was already there, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna opt out of that. Like, if it was sooner, then you might be able to make those adjustments sooner and make it leaner.
And make the routes.
Right from the beginning.
Yeah, so in August, the routes are basically what they are, and people can opt back in if they need to.
And if you
or
then,
whatever.
if there is any excess, it's not there from, you're not stuck with a bus driver that you didn't need or something.
And the bid specifications do allow us as a district to reduce the number of buses or increase the number of buses. So
Mhm.
we do have that built in as an opportunity.
Like at any time that you need to, yeah.
Yep.
In the bid, did you include GPSs as part of the technology
Yes.
request? Okay.
So GPS and cameras, so live feed cameras on the buses.
Great. And obviously for financial reasons, going with NRT would make the most sense. From a legal perspective, we have to go with the lowest bid, is that correct? Unless they don't meet our specifications.
Correct.
Okay.
If we find them to be a non-responsive bidder because of quality concerns or reference checks that do not come back, we could go with another bid.
Okay. Thanks.
The other, just no, I didn't. I don't know if this is in the other contract, and you probably already thought about it, but when my understanding is that the bus company sets sort of the routes and the stops, is that right? And so if there's been questions, sometimes parents have questioned about a stop, like I don't feel like this stop is safe, and the only answer seemed to be the bus company's answer is whether or not they were gonna move it. Is that something you can change in the contract, or is that something that's?
No, so we, in the current contract and the proposed bid specifications, there's a partnership in terms of routing. So we have the ability to have NRT route all of our routes, or we can route and make those determinations. When a parent shares or a family shares that a bus stop is unsafe, NRT or any bus company has a safety team to evaluate the stop. So a decision to relocate a stop is based on the bus company's safety team making a recommendation. If the recommendation is to move it, then we move it. If the recommendation is that there is not a safety concern, then the route stays the same. So that is really an internal decision.
Okay, yeah, that's what I've seen happen, and then there was a disagreement with the safety terms evaluation, and there was sort of nowhere to go. I didn't know if there was a way to work into the new contract, like the school gets to make a determination or something, because I've seen that happen where, as a parent, I looked at it and went, no, I wouldn't put my kid there, but other families had to figure out totally different, now I gotta drive my kid to school or something like that, because they just didn't feel safe. But it was because it was, as you described, the bus company's determination.
Becky, did anyone stay as you opened the envelopes?
Yeah,
Yes.
Really?
I was there.
Really?
I went.
There
They
was a
all
crowd.
stayed. It was an amazing experience, really. I mean, Becky brought the scissors, which was great for Keith. He cut open the envelopes. He opened them up. They were all like binders, and they opened it and they inventoried, made sure everything was there, and then they go around and they read the line by line. And, it was.
And your jaw dropped when you saw the percentage.
Well, it was like they walked out of the room and we're like doing the numbers, like, is that what we heard? But, yeah.
Yeah, no, and we had both First Student and NRT were present, as well as a company who actually provides
buses.
buses, so that they would know who was the low bidder in case they needed to be prepared for buses.
Because that's part of, in our thing, was the age of buses, so.
And the other context that we have to keep in mind is that the region is also a component of the town's educational budget, and the region's transportation increase as a result of these two bids is significant. It's, almost $700,000 to $800,000 to the regional budget. And people also will say, well, you get regional transportation reimbursement. There'll be a lag for a year before regional transportation reimbursement catches up to this new amount. So it's putting
And it wouldn't even cover the whole thing.
significant tension on the regional budget, either of the bids, the 51% or the 89%. So we are trying to balance, Southborough pre-K through 8, Northborough pre-K through 8, and the region, and both of the assessments to each of the communities for Algonquin.
Yeah, that is maybe a suggestion for the legislative request from the select board to state representatives that be fully funded.
Next on the agenda is the MSBA update on the Paisley Building Committee and the Z School roof project.
So the Paisley Building Committee will be meeting tomorrow evening, January 7th at 7:00 p.m. at Paisley Elementary School. The Paisley Building Committee did meet all of the eligibility phase requirements, which were due December 27th. At tomorrow evening's meeting, we'll be reviewing the enrollment certification document, talking about next steps in terms of feasibility. We're anticipating that the Paisley Building Committee will be invited to the MSBA board meeting in February to be invited into the feasibility phase. And so tomorrow evening we'll be talking about what that will look like and what the expectations are. And then lastly, we'll be touring Paisley School, so Paisley Building Committee members can get a sense of the existing conditions at Paisley at this time. And then secondly, the accelerated repair program for the Z roof commenced on January 2nd. So we are actually waiting to be assigned a MSBA liaison to help us move through that process. The funding that will be required up front is $15,000 for feasibility. So that is something that we will be learning more about when we meet with the MSBA rep and working closely with the town administrator to make sure that we have funding to fund that part of the project.
Kristen, did you have a question?
I did. So for Paisley,
Yeah.
are there any big hurdles left at this point?
Besides
Meaning
paying
as far
for
as
it?
eligibility, like,
No.
as far as
So-
like,
so
is
with-
this moving forward? Like,
Yeah, so
we're at-
MSBA.
Yeah.
So MSBA is like an elite college. It's hard to get accepted, but hard to leave. They want people to be successful, so they partner with communities that they want to be successful. So once you're invited into eligibility, unless something drastically goes askew, most communities are invited into the feasibility, and it's a commitment with MSBA to partner along the different phases. So
Okay, so as long
it's a
as you keep our
formality.
GPA up.
No.
Yeah.
Yes. So we are not at
Deposit our
a,
assignments
yes.
on time.
Yeah,
We are in good standing.
okay.
No senior
And-
skip days.
And invitation into feasibility is a formality. In fact, we were so efficient getting all of our eligibility tasks completed. They asked if we wanted to be invited to the December
December
board meeting,
Oh, wow.
which we declined.
Nice job.
Just to give us more time. And
Right.
this is not a race.
That's what happens when you do things well. You
Yes.
make people expect more.
Yes.
For the not Paisley, for the Z roof,
Mhm.
I know there were some, I'll say, complications with the Proctor roof, some little things like with the company and stuff. Would you use them again if the bids were right and stuff, or was there?
Yeah, I mean, I
enough
think we
things
would go
that-
through the procurement process
Yeah.
and see what our options are.
Yeah.
That was the first time we partnered with Cape Way Roof, and they were very responsive.
Yeah.
I think we would move through the process and see where we are at. It's a different type of roof, different systems. So.
Sorry, can you remind me what the 15,000 is for? I mean,
Feasibility, working on
Putting together like the plans and specs.
the plans and specs.
Deciding what.
Yeah,
Yes, preparing it to actually go for bid.
for procurement.
it goes to a different person. It's not like,
Yeah, so the
we don't,
accelerated
it's like you have to
repair
pay
program's a
people
little bit
to
different.
do bids
Yes,
type
yeah.
thing. It's like.
So the maximum for feasibility study that an accelerated repair program would be is $15,000 unless the project is over $5 million. We are under that, so $15,000 is kind of the max for feasibility. So it's a known cost. And then from there, we're assigned an OPM from MSBA, and they help us kind of move through the process of procuring and deciding on a contractor.
And then MSBA, is it like a 50%, just like the?
Yeah,
feasible?
it's approximately anywhere between 40 to 50%.
Mhm.
Depending on what's eligible. And Kelly, to your point, to your question, would we use the current roofing contractor? So that was different. That wasn't an MSBA.
Oh, that's
sponsored
right,
contract, so
okay.
The
They have
partners
other
will be-
people that they might.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they have to be DCAM certified
Yeah.
and they follow all of these different eligibility things and, the process that we went through.
Mhm. That's true, I forgot about that. We used ARPA funds for the Proctor roof. Okay. Superintendent report to the committee, enrollments.
So in your packet is the enrollment report. I think one important note is that we are looking at the number of sections needed and the number of educators needed to meet the number of sections at each grade level. So that has not been shifted on the enrollment report, but in the FY26 revised preliminary budget, it does account for the staffing and the enrollment shifts. And we did not see significant variation from the December report.
Next.
So we have, Becky will go over the FY25 budget line item transfers, the general fund expenditure report.
Okay. So since last month's meeting, there have been 3 additional function codes that were overexpended. The first was in the business and finance line, and that was due to a salary adjustment. The second was in the athletics line, and that was for new basketball uniforms at Melican Middle School. And then the last was for maintenance of buildings, and that was due to some unanticipated building repairs that were required. So in your packet, I have outlined the amounts that those lines were over expended and then where we would be finding the money elsewhere within our operational budget. As of December 31st, which marks actually the end of the first half of fiscal year 2025, believe it or not. So we have expended just over $10 million, and we still have 18 million encumbered for the remainder of the fiscal year. Our budget balance is $759,312, or 2.61% of the total operational budget. Really, I have to say the Northborough operational budget is, I think, holding steady, and I really have no concerns at all about the Northborough budget at this point in time.
That's great. Lauren?
I'll move to accept the FY25 monthly general fund report as of December 31st, 2024 until audited, as well as to move to approve the function codes listed above that are overexpended or projected to be overexpended in fiscal year 2025.
Second?
Great. Motioned by Lauren, seconded by Kristen.
Can I ask her a question?
Yes, discussion.
Discussion. Because I have to ask.
Yeah.
The money that was moved from the textbooks account to the new basketball uniforms, having played basketball all the way through my time in Northborough and Algonquin, et cetera, I'm not against it, but I'm wondering if was it extra, is it plans to fund something else, but where, see money coming out of textbooks. Yeah.
Sure. So we did have some textbooks that we actually had purchased at the end of last fiscal year that created a little bit of room in this year's budget because we were able to purchase those in advance. And so that's where that savings came from.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
The PTO used to buy athletic wear.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. That could be
Yeah, they used to,
often.
yeah, so we're trying to have the PTO provide other things for,
Like printers.
like printers.
No, I'm certainly not against the basketball uniform. You know, eventually they have to be replaceable. Especially
Yeah.
they're still rotating out the Titan ones too. I mean, the Tomahawks, right? And
Correct.
stuff. So it's, I know it's a multi-year process, and they don't last forever.
Yeah.
I had to ask.
Okay, so we had a motion by Lauren and seconded by Kristen. Joan,
Yes?
Bryce,
Yes.
Kristen,
Yes.
Lauren,
Yes.
and myself as a yes, passes unanimously. So that was for both 2 and 3 on the agenda items.
So also in your packet is the approved FY26, FY31 capital plan and approved FY26 budget priority document. And lastly, the FY26 budget calendar. And the last item for the superintendent's report is the FY26 revised preliminary budget presentation.
I requested that the superintendent and Becky just go from basically like the new information and the stuff that's changed versus doing the whole presentation. Is that,
You mean just updating us on what changed rather than repeating?
So
Yeah.
the preamble around strategic plan, kind of enrollment, not going over that again for this
Yeah.
meeting.
okay.
For the
Okay.
final recommended budget, we'll
We'll
give the
read everything and
entire
do everything, but
presentation
we're
for
just
the
kind of,
group.
I think that makes sense.
That's just
Okay.
streamlined.
yeah.
Does somebody have?
Oh, does the
And then
TV?
Scott, if you have any questions about, you know, how this fits into our mission or anything like that, certainly speak up.
Will do.
Let's see if it chooses to update during Becky's
And
presentation.
Just give you 1 second while I queue up the presentation for our online viewers. Yes, so at the end of November, we presented to the school committee a FY26 preliminary budget. That budget reflected a 5.83% increase over fiscal year '25. Since that presentation, the district leadership team, principals, educators have been working closely on fine-tuning the requests, looking more closely at the budget priorities. So the month of December has been fine-tuning, and this evening we'll present the work to the committee and where we are at this point in time. And I'll turn it over to Becky for the presentation.
So as Greg said, we are now in the January-February timeframe, and tonight we are presenting the revised preliminary budget to the Northborough School Committee. Just to give you a sense of where we were and then where we are at present, and then where we hope to be for fiscal year 2026. So in FY24, we did see a 4.9% increase over FY23. That budget really was a level services budget with a few additions, and those additions really revolved around some of our curriculum materials. We implemented the new ELA K through 5 curriculum resources, ST Math at the K through 5 level. We also brought in a mathematics screening and diagnostic assessment tool, and we introduced a new curriculum to our English language learners at the kindergarten level. In FY25, it was a 3.99% increase, again, for the most part, a level services budget with some additions. We implemented a new ELA curriculum at the middle school this year. We're in the process of doing that. We have a social and emotional learning curriculum. We have made some technology upgrades in terms of the devices that are available to our students and our staff. We also brought on board some math interventionists that Dr. Reinhorn spoke about earlier tonight. We are in the process of implementing a middle school mathematics curriculum, and we also are in the process of reintroducing a strings program at the elementary level. And now the preliminary, or the revised preliminary budget that we are presenting to you tonight is a 3.76% increase over fiscal year 2025. Again, a level services, and the one main addition really is with our mathematics, the K through 5 curriculum resources, and making sure that those resources are going to be available to our elementary students next year. Just for a point of reference, in terms of an increase or a decrease when we're looking at our budgets, based off of the fiscal year 2025 budget, 1% swing in either direction represents $291,196. We always keep that in the back of our mind when we are planning and we're trying to figure out where we need to be in the next iteration of the budget. Thought it would also be helpful to provide the committee with a look back at where we were at this point in time last year for fiscal year 25's budget. You can see the initial budget requests that came in from the NASA team was a 12.17% increase over FY24. The preliminary budget that was presented to the school committee in December was an 8.68% increase, and then we ultimately ended up at a recommended budget and approved budget of 3.99 for FY25. So we're not far off really from where we were last year at this point in time. When we began our process for FY 2026, we did begin that process back in September with all of the budgets coming due to the finance team in October. And the initial budget requests that were submitted did represent a 10.89% increase over fiscal year 25. From there, we make some preliminary budget offsets. We have available to us circuit breaker special education reimbursement funds. There are two types of funds. One is for tuition, and that's the larger number that you see. So that is for our students who require either out of district services or maybe require additional services within our district that meet the thresholds of the circuit breaker reimbursement, and that was $1.3 million. And then we also receive a reimbursement for our special education transportation, and that is for our out-of-district students, and that is for $129,710. So right off the bat, we were able to apply just under $1.5 million in offsets to that initial budget request number. And that brought our budget down to a 5.83%, which is the preliminary budget that was presented at last month's meeting. Since then, we have been doing a lot of work as a leadership team. We've had many conversations with the Operational Budget Subcommittee, as well as with principals and directors. And you can see that over the course of the past month, we have made some adjustments in terms of some additions to the budget. I think the largest one that you'll see is under operations, and that is due to our general education and our special education transportation. That's what that number represents. And then we've also made some reductions, but the net impact of all of these adjustments was a further decrease in the operational budget of $590,483. So it's
So for, I'm just looking at, so elementary reductions, $300,000. What are some examples of what is in that, just to?
Yeah. So I can tell you that we have had some retirements that have happened. So we've been able to achieve some savings from there. I think Greg also alluded to the fact that we are looking at our class levels or our class sizes at this point in time. I mean, we do have one bubble class at the 5th grade level. And so when that grade class moves up to Milliken, we will no longer need that section, and due to
And the
retirement,
kindergarten
we
doesn't
won't
need
need
it.
to.
And
Yes.
there's not a larger kindergarten to
Exactly.
keep it, so, okay.
So, through a retirement, we are able to achieve a savings through that. And the principals have also looked at some of like their budget lines, but I would say the majority of that really is coming from retirements.
Okay, is that Joan?
It is.
Joan?
Thank you. Becky, I just have one question. It's probably very simple, but I need the explanation. And you look at operations and you go to the net impact, there is a negative in front of the 170 where no other net impact has a negative. Can you just explain that?
Sure. So if you look at the adjustments on the operation, you can see that it's a negative 472,000. That's accounting for, first of all, the general education transportation contract that we just spoke about with the 51% increase on that line item, as well as our special education transportation. We are in the first year of a new contract with Assabet Valley Collaborative, and so we have been running some projections, and those costs are coming in higher than we had initially anticipated for this year. I think I had mentioned that in previous years. And so it's those two things that are really causing a larger adjustment, and the reductions did not meet the additions that were made to the budget under those line items.
So when we presented the preliminary budget in December, we had a 30% increase budgeted or projected for transportation.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the additions that you're seeing are a result of an additional percent increase to the budget that we had not projected. So that is now part of this revised preliminary budget.
Okay, so let me
So
ask,
basically, they
this is
couldn't find
Brenda.
enough money to
Do
cover
we-
it.
Do we have to find in other line items an extra 170,000 to make up that deficit? No?
No, because the net impact overall is we were still able to achieve some savings. If you look down at the bottom, like that bottom right-hand number is 590, so that's just the total of all of those numbers.
So like, for example, the elementary, there was no adjustments needed, but they had reductions, so that's
Correct.
positive 331. So
Right.
that positive 331 offsets the negative 170.
Which answers my question that to make up that deficit, we have looked at other different line items.
So I would just also add that what we're presenting this evening is a level services budget. So we have not reduced the level of services from FY25 to this revised preliminary budget. So class sizes are being met. We're not reducing the number of staffing that we have to support our students. It's really level services. So although it looks like it's a significant reduction, it is still a level services budget.
Versus a level funded, correct?
Level funded would mean in that we would have the same dollar amount budgeted
Right.
in FY25 for FY26.
Which
Correct.
would then affect the current programs that we have.
Then
which
we'd
we
be
wouldn't
looking
have.
at
Yeah,
staffing
okay.
reductions.
All right, thank you. I got it clarified. Thanks a lot. Oh,
Was that you, or is that Bryce?
that was me by
Oh,
mistake.
okay, okay.
I was trying to mute. Thanks.
Okay, so again, applying that additional 590 that we just spoke about, that's how we were able to bring our budget down to a 3.76% increase. One other, I think, table that's very helpful is to see the lines that have increased by over $50,000 over the previous fiscal year. You'll see that at least 3 of those are due to cost of living increases, due to our collective bargaining agreements, and that would be in the principal's office. That includes our administrative assistants that fall under the collective bargaining agreements, the teacher salaries, as well as the instruction, special education. Those are all salary line accounts. And then in the middle, you can see those two, transportation, special education, as well as general education. The teacher specialist line item is showing an increase of 51,000. That is actually a new line that we have created for special education. We've broken out our translations. It previously was only in our general education budget, and it was combined, so that it was very difficult for us in terms of reporting to DESE. So we have broken those out, so we now have a special education account for that. And then also medical therapy specialists, and that is a reallocation of some ancillary support professionals that are going to be working in another capacity. And then lastly, psychological special education, we have seen an increase in evaluations over previous years. So there are 8 lines there, and those total almost $1.3 million, which if you look at Stephanie, if you can go back to that last slide, you can see that our overall budget increase is just under $1.1 million. So those lines are really driving this operational budget.
Is that Joan or
Joan.
Grace? Joan?
It's me. Becky, thank you for this extra slide that I think I haven't seen before in past presentations. Very detailed, and the increase over FY25, especially for the transportation in both general ed and sped, really comes out when you see that increase. So I think this is so very detailed and very specific, and I think it's going to help when you have your meetings with the financial departments, the financial planning board in town and appropriations. I think this is going to be very, very acceptable, and it really, this transportation, it really, really stands out. But thank you for the detail and going the extra yard on this one. Thank you.
Kristen?
I did too. One on this slide with, when we were originally talking about transportation, I might have misheard, but I thought the increase was 51.95, but it's 42.5, or are they two different items that I'm confusing?
It is, so the contract is 51%. We have made some assumptions with this budget. We are hoping that we are going to be able to negotiate this contract.
Okay. And then do you mind backing up to like the reductions and adjustments for a second? I think, yeah, that one. I think it threw me in the beginning because the reductions were positive and the adjustments were negative. I was trying to do the other way around. Was this the adjustments, is that things that were requested? Like not things merely that existed this year, but this is what we would like to have, and then working from the budget. Am I correct in understanding?
So as we're going through, we're getting more information. So for example, under the student support services line, you'll see an adjustment of, or an increase to the budget. And sorry, that's the way my mind works because I'm adding money to the budget. So of 93,000, this was due to a student case that it appears that a student may require an out-of-district placement. And so out of an abundance of caution, we did add that to their budget.
Is that the preschool one? Is that which one?
No,
The
that's the
student support
93,000. And then teaching and learning.
Oh, student support services,
Yes,
gotcha,
yep.
yeah.
And then teaching and learning, we actually received some additional information related to some science curriculum, as well as we had thought we were going to be eligible for a grant for some of our math manipulatives, and it became clear that that was no longer going to be the case. So we did have to add those items into the budget. So that's why we were adding things to the budget as we were going along. And I wanted to provide all 3 of these columns so that you could see how we arrived at that 590,000.
That's being added, that would be an increase over the current year.
Well, decrease.
And-
An
if you
increase
go-
over the current year, but a decrease
So I think
to the
if you go back to
5%,
this slide here.
10%.
To the okay. That's
To the
what I-
preliminary
yes,
weeks,
the
yeah.
preliminary budget.
10.89%
Yeah.
includes all of the requests principals made. It does not include new positions, but it
Okay.
does include, for example, additional curriculum resources, So that is the number that we were looking at finding efficiencies. So obviously after applying circuit breaker, getting to that 5.83%, and then principals and directors looking more closely at their line items, looking at class sizes, that is how we were able to come to a $590,000 reduction to the 5.83% to bring it to 3.76%.
Thanks.
It's clear as mud.
I know.
No, go. Becky's mind is great at the numbers, so whatever, however your mind works
I
is
know,
fine.
it might
I'll
work
follow
different
along.
than other people. A lot of people will say that, so. Then the other item that we wanted to share with the committee too is there were a few items that were requested by the principals and the leadership team. And we wanted to show if the committee wanted to add these additional resources to the budget, what the impact would be. The first one is we've spoken about a math specialist, and that would be someone that would be able to help to implement the math curriculum in the next school year. We're projecting that that would have a 0.29% impact on the fiscal year 26 budget. The science curriculum, we do have a portion of that already funded in the operational budget. However, if we wanted to continue that implementation or accelerate that implementation, that would add a 0.07% increase to the budget. And then lastly, it was requested for a 0.5 occupational therapist, and that would add 0.14% to the operational budget.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like along the lines of where I was going to say, because when you looked at that earlier slide that had like the list of stuff that we were able to achieve with the percentage that we have, and the fact that this one, it was just like one thing, it made me feel like kind of defeated, like, you know, like where is our growth coming from? And I know we're hit with the transfers like that, but that thing's good.
I think one way to look at the budget is that it's not always, it's like, what are our goals? What are we trying to accomplish? So that's first. And then, do we have the resources to accomplish those goals? And if not, what resources do we need? We have a high level of services that we provide. It's a high baseline. So when I look at a level services budget in the community of Northborough, that's not, that is a high level of service. So I understand that you might look at that and say, okay, wow, we're not doing any, we're not adding anything. But I'd always would argue that even with a level services budget, there are opportunities for growth and improvement using the resources that we have. So that's one general comment. The other comment that I would, I think would caution us is that if we look outward to fiscal year 27, 28, 29, what is the budget landscape projected to look like? And we don't want to get into a position where we're adding positions
And then have to take them
reduce
away.
positions. So our greatest, I think, continuity and consistency is really important as you move through difficult budget kind of landscapes. I predict that FY27, FY28, FY29, and FY30 are going to be difficult budget seasons for the community of Northborough. It's bumping up against its levy capacity, which means that Proposition 2.5 will come into play, which means you now will have departments competing for the same dollars, which can be very contentious and potential override. So it's a context and a landscape we have to take into consideration as we look at the overall budget. That doesn't mean I'm not recommending adding positions, but I think it's important to keep in mind as we make decisions.
How many years has a math specialist been on our thing? Do we have that chart?
I think FY24 was the first year we asked for it.
And we put interventionists in place last
Yep.
year.
Yep.
So one of the things we're looking at is that this is a revised preliminary budget. One example is January 15th is the deadline for teachers to let us know whether they're retiring or not. So there could be a retirement that we're not planning on, which would then allow us to look at maybe adding a math specialist without impacting the overall budget increase with this revised program. So there are still opportunities in areas where the budgets are going to shift and evolve in preparation for our presentation at the February meeting of a recommended budget to the school committee. So it's just another aspect to consider as we move forward.
Everyone good? Thank you so much for all your hard work and your team's hard work and your continued hard work.
Becky and I did vote, we do not like not having a Northborough budget or school committee meeting the first week of
Yeah.
January.
Yeah.
Because it condenses our work
Oh, yeah.
considerably.
Yeah. I
So,
know. Also.
do you know who's in charge of the calendar?
Also, I think maybe don't go out to bid for anybody within a holiday week off. Because that lost us another week
Yeah,
there too,
yes, yeah.
you know?
Yep.
It's like, ugh. It's that stupid Thanksgiving, it threw us all off, I'm telling you. It's all Thanksgiving's fault. It's all their fault. Alrighty, school committee member reports. I have on mine NSPAC on Friday, January 24th at 9:30 a.m. They are going to do their coffee hour at the Westboro Panera. Also on their website and in their newsletter, they sent out a survey. They sent out a survey to all of the, well, it's their people that are and IEPs and stuff, but anybody within the thing can fill out the survey. So that's also on their website. And it was in their newsletter. Peasley's tomorrow night. Don't have solar anymore. I think that's about it.
Maybe at Z someday.
Maybe,
That's the goal.
maybe we'll come back. Anything, Lauren?
No, a lot of coming up this month, so February, I'll have some updates. The only thing is Coalition for Equity. I think that you had said it's meeting this month. I don't think we've gotten a notification about
Okay,
that
so
anywhere
I'll
else.
follow
So if you can
up.
just, yeah, thank you.
The Wellness Committee hasn't met since our last meeting, but is meeting Thursday, so I should be able to attend that. Same with the Capital Planning Subcommittee, since our last meeting, we haven't met. I'm on 2 working groups from the Policy Subcommittee. One has met once a couple weeks ago before Christmas, and then we'll meet again on Wednesday. The other hasn't met yet, but is still planning to schedule. So we're on 3 different policies.
Great. Anything for town finance?
Nothing for me, thank you.
Joan, do you have anything?
The only thing I have is that the Cellar, which is the restaurant that is in Northborough,
Yes.
it graciously donated like over $1,000 to be the sponsor for the book award that will take place that the 4th, 5th, and 6th graders do, I think, or 5th, 6th, 7th. And that will take place in March or April. So along with the school librarians and the town librarians, they work together on this, and the students get to read various books, and then they vote on their favorite. And so this will supply the books to the schools and any other information that has to be sent out. And one of the things will be decals that will be put on the books that it was donated by the Cellar. So there's 2 big things that are always a huge grant award, and this one, the Cellar agreed to do for over $1,000 for the Northborough Ed Foundation. So that's a great help. That will go out to all the schools, and those books then will remain in the school libraries and the town library. So that's it from the Ed Foundation. And they're working on one of the other events that they'll be working on and they have a meeting coming up this week. That's it.
Great, thank you. Bryce, you all set?
No updates.
Thank you. All right, educational policy, none at this time. Policy development and distribution, none at this time. Personnel items, distribution of personnel report. It's on our
It's in your packet.
packet.
More appointments than
Yeah, that's better. Better.
retirements or resignations.
Okay. Communications, none at this time. Action on minutes. We have the open meeting minutes of December 4th, 2024, and the special open meeting minutes from December 10th, 2024.
We do them together.
Yeah.
I move to approve the open meeting minutes of December 4th, 2024, as well as to approve the Northborough South Committee special open meeting minutes of December 10th, 2024.
Second.
Motion by Lauren, seconded by Kristen. Any discussion? Bryce?
Yes.
Joan?
Yes,
Kristen?
Yes.
Lauren?
Yes.
And myself is a yes, passes unanimously. Future agenda items, we have school safety update, multilingual update, PTO presentations. We're starting with Melican, I believe. Anything else? Anyone foresee?
Food services.
Food services, yes. Is that Bryce or Joan?
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 yes, whether it's an agenda item or we receive it separately, the MCAS comparison from the 2018, and then also neighboring like districts
Yep.
on the MCAS scores.
MCAS follow-up.
Okay, thank you.
And recommended budget.
Recommended budget. So we're gonna have, so is that the open meeting then, or no?
The hearing will be in March.
The hearings in March then, okay.
So February will be the school committee voted budget, the superintendent's recommended budget, and then potentially school committee voted budget, and then March is the public hearing.
Were we gonna switch that at one point? Or did that work? So that the public hearing was before the vote?
That's what I said, but I guess, I don't know. That's what I was saying, that to me, it makes more sense to hear from the public before we put it through, but it's always been done this way. so.
I think you could do two things. You could have two public hearings. You could do an informal public hearing before,
Maybe we could do office hours.
That's what I was just gonna say. Like,
So
or
Kelly, you
in
and
the
I will work
office hours.
together and
Yeah.
think about the
Maybe we could
sequence of-
schedule it as like a budget office hours type thing. That was one of the things from the MASC conference that they were saying about having office hours or things that are like specific topics, you know, for people. Like you could have one about transportation and then, because usually that will draw people in more if you're talking about something specific versus just saying open office hours. People are, they don't think of what their issues are,
Right.
things like that. So.
We could also, just a recommendation, we could provide the recommended budget presentation, open it up for a public hearing,
Yeah.
and then the school committee then could enter, engage in discussion and conversation and potential vote.
Yeah, I mean, I would be fine with that as a chair. I would be fine with having people, if they want to, after the recommended budget, to have audience share or audience
Yeah.
input, but in a way that could be a dialogue.
So there are advertising requirements with the public hearing, so
Yeah.
we would have to, I think we have to publish it 2 weeks in advance.
Mhm.
So if we were to do that, we just need to know well in advance so I can get that.
I think we keep our regularly scheduled public hearing, the formal one,
Okay.
where it is, and then create some type of space for people to get feedback on the recommended budget before it's voted.
After the February meeting. So we'll hear it from the public after the February meeting, but before the open meeting.
Can we move
In
our
March.
vote, or does that mess you up completely?
Our vote? Well, we
Like
can
if
always
we
change our
voted in
vote.
March.
We
Oh,
can
okay.
vote in
I
our,
didn't
we
know if
can
that
vote
was
in
the
our
timeline.
budget, and then if for some reason we were unhappy
Yeah.
with it, you can always re-vote it, like change it, rescind it, and then,
Right, no, I meant like,
Yeah,
just
I
push
mean,
it back a month.
I think
would that
as
mess you
long
up?
as, for us, having a school committee voted budget, as long as we know, it's fine to wait till March, as long as we know there aren't going to be significant
Surprises.
changes.
Right, if there was a huge red flag, we would have said something, too, yeah. yeah.
So typically, the budget in February that we present ends up being the final budget, so, and waiting another month, it wouldn't be an issue.
Right, for me, as a member, I think I would appreciate, just like with the calendar,
Yeah.
like getting the information like in February, having the presentation, and then having some time to like think about it and go over, or get feedback via email or what have you. Then have the public comment at the beginning of March, like you did the forum. And then doing a vote in March meeting, if that works for your, if it doesn't hold you guys back, you know. The office hours is also another option, putting the topic in or advertising it. I was also going to say, with our public comment in the meetings, we can do a dialogue. Like, it's our policy that we don't. We would probably have to vote or put something in saying we are allowing dialogue of this, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a hearing. Like the select board does that. That's their format. They go back and forth for each topic. They have public comment and they engage. I wouldn't say that's a
you want a
typical
10-hour
thing.
meeting? I'm
No.
hearing you want longer
No.
meetings. No, I'm just
I'm
kidding.
saying if that's what you want, you mentioned I'd want to have
Yeah.
an engagement, if you wanted that
Yeah.
for this specific topic under the,
Yeah.
with the time limit of the specific amount.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
then-
I think that administration is allowed to correct facts or add details. It's really school committee members who are not allowed to engage in dialogue. If I
Well,
recall.
That's our
it's
policy.
moreover.
We're not allowed to.
Well,
We
it's
decided
it's
that's a bad
not
idea.
about it's if it's not an agenda item. If it's on an item that's not on the agenda, it's ill-advised to engage in it because then there's no notice for other people to
join in the
participate
conversation.
and join in the
Well, I think if
conversation.
it's not an agenda item, you can redirect them to, right? This is not an agenda item, we need to move on and,
Yeah.
yeah, even if it is actually meant by the committee, they're sort of taking up space.
Yeah.
But, yeah, no, I don't think that having an engagement is a great consistent method. It just, as you were saying, very, very long.
Yeah.
But if, instead of having a second public hearing, you wanted a back and forth, but there are other ways, obviously, for, the public to, they can
You-
comment, they can
You could
email,
have
they
a
can do a
special
lot of
open
different
meeting
things. Yeah.
with a budget presentation.
Have office hours with them and just do it then, so.
Yeah.
So Kelly, you
Probably
and
not
I will
necessary.
work together.
Yep.
Joe?
Joan? If I hear a ding, I'm just gonna say Joan,
So Joan, you are on mute.
I don't want you to forget me at all. So I always ding in. Do we know what the timeline is from the town to submit the budget warrant number? We have a timeline from them yet. I know the town is just starting on their budgets, I think.
do we have to do it before March?
So the warrant articles have to be submitted by February 3rd, but we could put a placeholder in as long as we have our warrant article, and then we could always update numbers.
So
Because that.
Do we
wouldn't-
have a
Either way,
warrant?
we wouldn't have been voted on that, yeah.
do we have a warrant?
So let me work with the town to talk about what their timelines are.
Yeah.
I want to say, thinking about how this worked last year, I think the number 4 to 6 weeks is in the ballpark,
Like mid-March,
something like that.
because the select board has to vote on it, right, and they would vote probably beginning of April.
Becky, have we done a placeholder before?
I think
And
we
is the
did
town
last
acceptable
year.
to that?
I think we did last year, where we entered the warrant article, and then we presented them with our final budget number once we had that.
Okay, so they were okay with that?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So Becky, we have to have it in there by
Well,
February 3rd?
well, their meeting is Monday, February 3rd is what.
So we'll,
and then ours
we'll
is
reach out to
Wednesday,
the
the
town
5th.
and find out when their key milestones are. Typically, there's some
Okay.
flexibility with their dates. Like they're trying to get a draft of the warrant articles that they can expect. So draft warrant articles are submitted, but the final warrant articles and the way the dollar amounts usually is far closer to the annual town meeting. So let us do our homework and find out when those key milestones are, and then we'll get back to Kelly.
Okay, thank you.
Just putting warrant articles on that. Okay. Approval of bills and payrolls. Bryce, Becky was asking me the other day if we're in a competition to who can approve warrants quicker. She's appreciating. She's appreciating that it was like 10 minutes from when it was originally sent last week for us both to approve.
It's Bryce 5, Kelly 1. If you're keeping score.
I actually think he's twice beat me. Just to put it out there. I know he's good now. So, audience sharing. No. Okay. No other business? All right. Our next meeting is going to be Wednesday, finally back to a Wednesday meeting, February 5th. And then the combined meeting is going to be Wednesday, March 12th, and that's going to be in Southborough at Trottier, unless they end up shifting it. But we will have a special combined virtual meeting in the next few weeks to talk about transportation. So that will be a virtual meeting. All right. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Motion by Kristen, seconded by Lauren. No discussion. Bryce?
Yes.
Joan?
Yes.
Kristen?
Yes.
Lauren?
Yes.
And myself is a yes. We are adjourned at 8:46 PM.